Jigyasvara Tinne Brahma Hrudaya Adikavaye Mojanti Jasuraya Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargumrisa Dhamna Svena Sada Nirhasta Kuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of
I offer
Godhead.
my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
He is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of
the
Brahmaji.
Original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
Of water seen in fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen in fire, of land seen in water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes
Appear
of nature.
factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is eternally existent in the transcendental
Which is
abode.
forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma
truth.
projita kaitruvocha.
Dharma projita kaitavatra.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavam atra vastu.
Vedyam vastavam astra vastu.
Shivadam tapatrayon mulanam.
Shivaram tapo trayomulanam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni.
Kim va purir ishwaraha.
Kim va paririshvaraha.
Sajohridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyurudya varidya titra.
Kriti bihi sususubhistakshanat.
Kritivhi shishushuvistatyanat.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproot the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva's
is
maturity,
sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this cult of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam
Nigama kalpatoro kalitam palam,
sukamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukamakad amrita drava sankitam,
Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam
Muhur
rasamalayam,
ahoraska bhuvibhavukaha.
Mohura hura sika bhuvivabuka.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad
The mature
Bhagavatam.
fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literature.
It emanated from the lips of Śrīla Śukadeva Gosvāmī.
It emanated from the lips of Śrīla Śukadeva
Therefore,
Gosvāmī.
this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for
Although
all,
its nectarian juice already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Shrivantam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantaksto hi Bhadrani.
Hridyantastuhi Abhadrani.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidunoti Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic
or to hear
literatures,
from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad
is
Gita,
itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And from who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotees constantly engaged in hearing.
Nastapresu bhadresu
Nasta praishva
nityam
bhadresu
bhagavata sevaya
nityang bhagavata
bhagavati uttamasloke
bhagavati uttamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistike.
bhaktir bhavati nasti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental
As
knowledge.
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tada rajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
kamaloba
cheta
dayascha
itara navidam
cheta itarana vidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
stitam sarve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and thus
ignorance.
material lust and avarice are diminished.
As material lust and avarice are
Evam
diminished.
prasana manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
bhagavad bhakti yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
bhagavad tattva vijnana
mukta sangasya jayate.
mukta sangha sajayate.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the, by development of, when these impurities are purified,
when all these impurities are wiped
when
away,
these impurities are wiped away,
when all impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure
the
goodness,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate hridaya granthis,
chidyante sarva samsaya,
chidyante sarva samshaya,
siyante chasya karmani,
kiyante chasya karmani,
drishta eva atmanishvare.
drusta evadmaneshwari.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of material
and
affection
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables them to come at once to the stage of assumption,
understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead.
understanding supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna
can one
consciousness
understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 9. Prasanavakram nalinai yatekshanam
Prasanna vaktram nalinayate kyanam
kadamba kinjala pisangavasasam
kadam vakinjal kapashangavasasam
lasan maharatna hiranmayana gadam
lasan maratna hiramayan gadam
spuran maharatma kirita kundalam.
Spuran Maharatna Kiripta Kundalam.
Translation by Śrīla Prabhupada. So now we're hearing the descriptions of the form of the Paramatma, which has 24 different forms in the heart of every living entity. His mouth expresses his happiness. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, his ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. Text 10. Unidrahit pankaja karnikalaye
Unidra Hiritpankaja Karnikalaye
Yogeswarasta Pitapada Palavam
Yogeshwara Stapita Padapalavam
Shilakshanam Kostubaratna Kandaram
Shilakshanam Kaustuba Radna Kundaram
Amlana Lakshmya Vanamala Yachita
Amlana Lakshmya Vanamala Yachitam.
His lotus feet are placed over the whirl over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustuba jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ornaments, flowers, clothing, and all other decorations on the transcendental body of the Personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, in the Paravyoma, meaning the spiritual world, spiritual varieties are also distinguished from the material varieties. It's a very important point. In other words, Prabhupada's Bhagavatam or Śukadeva Gosvāmī is teaching the difference between the spiritual world and the material world. So in the spiritual world, everything is spiritual, including flowers, including all different varieties of decorations and so forth that are on the body of the Lord. In fact, those things are non-different than the body of the Lord. This is incomprehensible for materialists. They can't figure all these things out by speculation. That's why material education is a waste of time, because it just teaches people how to stay in the material world, and with no knowledge at all of the science of spiritual reality. Text 11. Vibhusitam me kalayanguliyaker.
Vibhusitam me kalayanguliyaker.
Mahadanirnu purakankanadibihi.
Mahadanirnu purakankanadibihi.
Singdamalakun chitanila kuntaler.
Singdamalakun chitanila kuntale.
Virochamananahasapesalam.
Virochamananahasapesalam.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair, curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others, and Śrīla Śukadeva Gosvāmī describes every part of his transcendental beauty one after another, in order to teach the impersonalist that the Personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee for facility of worship, but is the Supreme Person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiations from the sun. So again, we're basically being shocked by the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. We, of course, have been programmed by nonsense education to believe that reality is only material and anything spiritual is nonsense. But it's exactly the opposite, that everything material is nonsense and the reality of the spiritual world is the real thing. But the overwhelming pressure on everybody to accept this absurd understanding that everything is material has condemned people to take birth over and over again in the material world in 8,400,000 different species. It's a curse. It is a magical spell by a demon called scientists and philosophers. These are all demons because they want to convince us that there's no such thing as a spiritual world and that we should only stay in the material world, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending like animals. And there's nothing, no spiritual reality. So if you want to be a demon, then you believe this nonsense that they're teaching, that everything is material. But if you want to be liberated from this nonsense of the material world, one has to hear these descriptions and take them seriously and believe them with faith. So then the next verse, text 12. Adina lila hasite shana lasad.
Adina lila asite kasolasad.
Brubanga samsuchita buri anugraham.
Brubhanga sambuchita buri anugraham.
Iksheta chinta mayam enamishwaram.
Iksheta chinta mayam ena ishwaram.
Yavan manodharanaya vatistate.
Yavan mano dharanaya vatistate.
Translation by Śrīla Prabhupada. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord, as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada. Now this is another very important purport, full of information. Dhananjaya, can you bring me what was printed out? The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord, as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. In Bhagavad Gita 12.5, it is said that the impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation. But the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore a source of suffering for the impersonalist. Here, the devotee has an advantage over the impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. For this reason, there is an authentic statement in the Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. Well, we just heard some of that positive description of the form, the real form of the Lord. And we see how the impersonalists are wasting their time meditating on something they cannot conceptualize. You cannot conceptualize the Brahman conception because there's nothing personal. There's no objects. There's nothing to meditate on except some light. And in the case of the Buddhists, except nothingness. So at least meditating on some light is something. Meditating on nothingness is nothing. Or as one Christian minister said when he was asking for donations, he ended up his appeal for donations by saying, nothing of nothing is always nothing. See? And that's a fact. That's the dilemma of the Buddhists. And the dilemma of the Mayavadis meditating on the Brahma or Brahmajyoti or Brahman effulgence is they go blind. If you look at the sun every day and focus and meditate on the sun, you would go blind. Right? Especially the sun at its high point around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. You'll go blind. Eventually, it'll destroy your eyes. So both the Buddhists and the impersonalists become blind. They have no knowledge at all of who Krishna is. And they basically limit themselves from receiving any knowledge because they say the whole spiritual world is an illusion and the whole material world is an illusion. The only reality is this light or the nothingness. The process of meditation recommended herein is bhakti yoga, or the process of devotional service, after one is liberated from the material conditions. Well, that's an important point. One has to be liberated from the material conditions in order to begin devotional service. And by beginning devotional service, one becomes, one loses all attraction to the material world, right? One may reject the material world, just like the Mayavadis and the Buddhists, they also reject the material world, right? That doesn't mean their attraction to it is finished. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, i.e., when one is nivrita, now this is a very important verse, very important word in Sanskrit, as previously stated herein. So where was it previously stated herein? It was in Canto 2, Chapter 2, verse number 6. Right now we're on verse number 12. And verse number 6, in the third line of the verse, it says, Tam nivrito niyatarto bhajeta samsara hetu paramas chayatra. And it says, he is the ultimate goal of life, and by worshiping him, one can end the cause of the conditioned state of existence. So that's what nivrita means. Nivrita means, as it says here, when one is freed from all material necessities. Wow, that's a really important word, necessities. One becomes qualified to discharge the process of bhakti yoga. Well, that means that a person has to become self-sufficient. It should not depend on anything extraneous. Just depend on Krishna, who's in the heart. And not be attracted to anything in the material world. So, nivrita means when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of bhakti yoga. Therefore, bhakti yoga includes jnana yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of jnana yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by the gradual development of pure devotional service. So pure devotional service, as we've said many times, is a gradual development. It's not a presto, 1 minute thing. It takes basically a long time. Of course, one can take the Krishna consciousness immediately, and that's the perfect position, being engaged in devotional service. But to become completely free of the attraction to the material world, that could take a long time of practice of devotional service. Just like it says, the young boys who are engaged in pastimes with the Lord in the spiritual world, they all attained that position after a very long time, many, many births and deaths of devotional service. These effects of bhakti yoga are called anartha nivriti. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of bhakti yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead. The first processional step must show its effect by anartha nivriti. So the first processional step, in other words, there's a progress. So this is explained a little bit later on, but in the 4th chapter, 11th verse, in the purport, Prabhupada quotes the verse that explains this, and it says, Aho Shraddha Bhajana Kriyata Anartha Nivriti Syat. Aho Shraddha Sadhusanga Bhajana Kriya Anartha Nivriti Syat. So this is Adho Shraddha Tata Sadhusanga Ta Bhajana Kriya. Tato anartha nivritti syat. Tato nista ruchis tata anasaktis. Tato bhavas tata prema yadunchati. So this is the process, progressional process of devotional service. And we're going to go deeper into understanding of that verse. But it says, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an advanced spiritual master. And under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the all absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. This is an amazing explanation and translation of this verse, which was originally given by, I think, Rupa Goswāmī. Yeah, because according to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.4.15 and 16, and it's entitled The Science of Devotional Service. Well, obviously this is scientific information. It's giving the step-by-step advancement of a person from ignorance to fully realized spiritual knowledge, and by which one, there's no going back. One is fully convinced that the material world, all the education in it, all the different endeavors in it for sense gratification, it's all nonsense. It's all illusory because it does not have eternal continuity. It's just will-o'-the-wisp experiences that come and go, like the wind comes and goes. But we're so attracted to it that it's almost impossible to break our attachments. It's only possible under the guidance of bona fide spiritual masters and by regular hearing. Those are the two most fundamental things. One, associating with genuine sadhus. Two, hearing from genuine sadhus. The Vedic literature. It's not that they make up the literature. They're repeating correctly what has already been spoken by Krishna and the great acharyas. So it says, when one is nivrita, as previously stated herein, or when one is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of bhakti yoga. Therefore, bhakti yoga includes jnana yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of jnana yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by a gradual development of pure devotional service. So, and then in this 411 purport, it says, one, it says, in the premise stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So by the slow process of devotional service, and here it says, by the gradual development of pure devotional service. Okay, so these effects of bhakti yoga are called anartha nivriti. In other words, clearing away all inauspicious things or unnecessary things. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of bhakti yoga. So when it says artificially acquired, it's all things that we buy, that we think we need, but really don't need them. Meditation on the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the first processional step, must show its effect by anartha nivriti. In other words, the first step of meditation, basically on the feet of the Lord, as it's described previously, and I'll get more into it, you begin meditating on the Paramatma by starting at the feet of the Paramatma, not going directly to the face. And the effect of such meditation on the feet of the Lord is you begin the process of anartha nivriti, getting rid of all unnecessary things that are obstacles in the meditation. The grossest type of anartha, which binds the conditioned soul in material existence, is sex desire. Notice it doesn't say sex, it says sex desire. And this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the false sense of egoism, or the sense of myself and mine, becomes prominent, and the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements resembling the foam of the sea waves. In other words, there's millions of waves in the ocean, right? And when they go up, they're up in the air a little bit because the wind is blowing them, it develops some foams, a bubbling, right? So it's like these bubbles of foam in the ocean. No real significance at all. It's just a temporary show. All conditioned souls are mad after, the conditioned soul is encircled by such products. Resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products as well as products of sex desire, and therefore bhakti yoga leads to gradual evaporation of the sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on the sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. Sex desire is diminished along with the various forms by the process of bhakti yoga, because bhakti yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are. So now this, and from the rest of this purport, there are going to be a series of definitions of words. So here's the real definition of the word knowledge. See, when you read Srimad Bhagavatam, you get the real definitions of the common words that we use every day, in which the common understanding of these words are diluted by material desires. Therefore, the dictionaries that people write, and you'll see there are many different dictionaries, and some are better than others, because some of the definitions are either too basic or do not really hit the nail on the head. it's a saying, you know, the hammer, you hit the nail on the head. You don't miss the head. That way the nail goes into the wood. So some definitions don't hit the nail on the head. They define the word, but it's not really absolutely clear, and it doesn't cover all the different meanings of that word. And then there are better dictionaries that cover all the meanings of the word in different contexts. So, the sex desires diminish along with its various forms by the process of bhakti yoga, because bhakti yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are, and if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. That's the point, is freeing oneself from all unnecessary entanglements. Now, the way you do that is by engaging in devotional service, and that means there's two fundamental components: sadhusanga and hearing from the sadhus or the genuine devotees, the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam on a regular basis. Then one makes gradual advancement. So, and what is one sign of that gradual advancement? Anartha nivritti, giving up unnecessary things in your life, things that you thought were necessary but are not really necessary. You became convinced by propaganda or advertisement, you know, and then peer pressure also. Oh, my neighbor bought a Tesla. Oh, I think I got to get a Tesla too. You know. Oh, look at that. My neighbor just put in new floors, you know, cork floors in their house. I got to do that too. You know. So, who cares what the neighbor does, right? But no, you have to stay abreast or stay up. There's a saying in English. To stay abreast of the Joneses. In other words, whatever the Joneses do next door, you got to do also, so they don't get ahead of you, right? Materially. So, knowledge means knowing things as they are. And if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that the material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. So now he's defined knowledge, knowing things as they are, and number two, vairagya, detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient. Whoa, there it is. The transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich, blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Well, there was once this sadhu, and he lived under a tree. I think it was a moringa tree or a tamarind tree, one or the other. And one day this great king came to him and said, Sadhuji, he said, you have so much knowledge. You're such a nice person. You come and live with me in my palace. You be my guru. I'll feed you. I'll give you everything you need, and you can, instruct me. And he said, no, I don't need to go to your palace. I don't need anything that you might want to offer me. I'm very satisfied here. I eat some of the leaves from this tree, and I make a little sabji with it, and it provides some shade in the hot sun, from the hot sun, and at night I sleep here. I don't really need anything. I don't have to live in your palace. Right? If you want knowledge, you come here. So, you see, I mean, this is a sadhu, a real sadhu, right? He's not going to depend on the rich guy's offer. You know, just like you know, in business, somebody's working in a company, and there's people called headhunters. That word comes from, I think it comes from this, the idea of tribal people who are headhunters. They capture people and they kill them and they shrink their heads and they wear those heads like a garland, right? So that's a very correct way of characterizing these so-called corporate headhunters. They have companies and the corporate CEOs, they contact them and say, I need a guy who can do this and that and this, and it's got to be like this and that. So they go out and they hunt people, and then they make them an offer better than what they are getting in their company. And usually that's the way people get what you call advance their career, by changing companies and getting a bonus for quitting that company and joining the other company. Usually it's like $50,000 or $100,000 just for accepting to quit the other company and come to the new company, and then they get a better salary and a better position, right? If they were a partner in Microsoft, they become a VP in Amazon, you know, something like that. So these are headhunters, right? You can see how the corporate culture is jungle. You know, the big animal eats the little animal. That's the whole ethos of such a culture. The stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that the transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from the rich blind persons to fulfill the bare necessities of life. Śukadeva Gosvāmī, in other words, when he describes the necessities of life, he says the bare necessities of life, meaning you don't really need a lot of things to be happy and to be self-sufficient or to maintain yourself. You just need a few good things, you know. Okay. Śukadeva Gosvāmī has suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping, and shelter. But he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has the sex desire still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. Wow, that's a big statement Prabhupada is making. For one who has not attained to this stage, there's no question of a renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process, see how many times he's repeating this, by the gradual process of devotional service, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, and following the principles of the Bhagavatam. See, those are the two essential components of progressing in the gradual process of devotional service. You accept the association of genuine sadhus, and you accept to hear from them Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam on a daily basis. So by the gradual process of devotional service, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able to at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life. In other words, desire may be there, but one does not try and satisfy it. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire. And this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein. So it doesn't say meditation on the Lord's Rasa Leela dance. It doesn't say that. It says meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein. So he's describing the ornaments on the body of the Paramatma. you're not even meditating on Krishna. Krishna's original form. You're meditating on his Paramatma form. And you're not even beginning with his face. You're beginning with his feet. And you're not supposed to advance from the feet until at least you have understood, at least we have understood the first and second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then we have to go through the other 8 cantos, other 7 cantos, before we're even allowed to go to the 10th canto. So it's a very gradual process of hearing and chanting and serving. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. One time Prabhupada says, no one can tell you if you are advanced or not advanced. Only you can tell by how much you are detached from sense gratification, from sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasa Lila of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulgence in sex life in the name of the Bhagavatam. So this is the problem with sadhus, Babajis, living in Radha Kund and in holy places. They often have 1, 2, 3, 4 girlfriends. They might even be old ladies, but they're girlfriends. They cook for them, they massage them, and they do all kinds of things. They even have sex. And this is in the holy Dham. It could be Radha Kund, it could be Vrindavan, it could be Benares or Nasik, it can be Haridwar, it can be Rishikesh, it can be Srirangam. It can be all these different places where there are Babajis that are apparently completely renounced. They're living very simply, but they might be smoking ganja, they might have girlfriends. It's unbelievable, but it's a fact. That doesn't mean everybody is like that, but there are many cases of people like that. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulgence in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. This vilification of Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Bhagavatam. Wow, that's a big point. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yata yata dis chasudyati vishaya lampatyam tyajati tata tata darayed iti chitta sudhi taratam yenaiva dhyayana taratam yam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart. In other words, it's a slow process going up from the feet to the smiling face of the Lord as Paramatma. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam, the conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So you see, it's a gradual process, just like it's a gradual process to read 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, going verse by verse and reading each purport. It's not that you go verse by verse and miss the purport, so you go faster. So you have to actually read the purports also. So these types of recitations of Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, by just reading the verses, it's not actually good to do that. It is good to read the verses and the purports. That is good. Okay, so this is a long purport, and it's got a lot of highly, let's say, high-class realizations in it. And we should take this very seriously. Prabhupada has given a lecture in which he elaborates on these points even more. And this is Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, 47th verse, lecture given in Ahmedabad, December 12th, 1972. We're not going to go through the whole thing today, but we'll continue it tomorrow. I just want to do a little bit in the beginning. So Prabhupada says, so we have been discussing Bhagavad Gita in 2nd chapter. The Lord has very elaborately explained the constitutional positioning of the living entity and the whole first portion of the 6th chapter. The Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 portions. The first 6 chapters, the second 6 chapters, the first 6 chapters, the second 6 chapters, and the third 6 chapters. Actually, just like this book, there are 2 hardcovers, and in the middle there is the substance, all the writing. So the first 6 chapters, they are just like 2 coverings, meaning the first and the last 6 chapters, like 2 coverings, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. And the middle 6 chapters, well protected, that is Bhakti Yoga. So at the end of the first 6 chapters, Krishna concludes the yoga system. In the 6th chapter, he has explained that Sankhya Yoga system, and the concluding portion of the Sankhya Yoga system is Yoginam api sarve samadgatanantarat pranam Shraddhavam bhajate yomam samyukta tamo matak. Bhagavad Gita 6:47. This is the conclusion of the yoga system. People generally, they are attracted by the yoga system. So the yoga system means always thinking of Krishna. So that's the definition. This is what yoga means. Always thinking of Krishna. So you see, Prabhupada is defining words that we use normally, but don't know what the actual clear-cut meaning of it is. So why don't you look up yoga and see what it says. Look at the dictionary. Dictionary explanation of the word. And then you can go to different yoga schools. They have their. So what's it say? Oh, read it here. Read it.
So it says yoga is a Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which, including breath control, simple meditation, and the adoption of specific bodily postures, is widely practiced for health and relaxation.
Right. Does that sound like the real definition of yoga? You see, we're living in the world of words, you know, and the words are basically meaningless. You know, they've, as they say in English, they've bastardized it so much that it's actually meaningless. You know, first of all, is yoga a Hindu thing? Is Bhagavad Gita a Hindu book? No. Does it mention Hinduism once in the Bhagavad Gita? Does Krishna mention, I am a Hindu? Does Arjuna ever say, or the Pandava ever say, we are Hindus? No, it doesn't say that, right? And why is yoga characterized as a Hindu thing? You see, this is all misleading. That's why you cannot really get an education in a school. The schools will rely on these type of definitions of the words. All the words we use are going to be wrongly used,
Correct.
wrongly understood. See, this is my point. It's not my point. It's Prabhupada's point. You know? So he says here very clearly It says, so yoga system means thinking of Krishna. This is samadhi. So 5,000 years ago when this yoga system was discussed between Krishna and Arjuna, Arjuna frankly admitted that this system was very difficult for him. He thought himself as a grihasta and a military man. So concentration of the mind and sitting in a posture and looking at the point of the nose, so many systems, finding out a secluded place, alone, observing so many rules and regulations, asana, dhyana, pranayama. So he thought it difficult for him. Therefore, Krishna, in order to encourage him that although he could not practice the Ashtanga yoga system, still there is no cause of disappointment, he concluded, tapas vibhyo diko yogi, jnani bhyo pi mato dika, karmi bhyas chadiko yogi, tasmat yogi bhavarjuna. Bhagavad Gita 6.46 is the previous verse to the one he's studying. Krishna insisted. And then Prabhupada says something to a devotee. He says, why are you sitting like that? Sleeping. If you feel sleepy, don't sit like that. So then he says, so the conclusion is, yoginam api sarve samad gatanantaratmanam shadavam bhajate yomam same yukta tamo matak. Bhagavad Gita 6.47. This is conclusion, that of all yogis, who is always thinking of me, Shraddhavan, with faith, without being Shraddhavan. Shraddha is the beginning of everything. Faith, Shraddha, respect. If you have no respect for Krishna, if you have no faith in Krishna, there is no advancement of spiritual life or yoga life. Therefore, it is said Shraddhavan, Ado Shraddha. The beginning of spiritual life is Shraddha, faith, Ado Shraddha. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhusanga. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 23, 14, verses 14 and 15. First of all, faith. And faith has been described by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami as faith means Vishvasa. So he explains. So what did Prabhupada do? Right away, he's defining more deeply the meaning of yoga and how you actually engage in yoga. So yoga is always thinking of Krishna. And Arjuna said, look, I can't do it. It's too difficult. Holding these sitting positions and breathing exercise and all that stuff. I'm an active guy. I can't, I'm working. I'm a Kshatriya. I'm training for killing people. And I'm married. I got 4 wives, I got kids. I mean, how am I going to do this? Just sit in one place in a cave and meditate? I can't do that. So Krishna says, don't worry, he says, who is always thinking of me. This is the conclusion. All right. And then immediately goes into Shraddha. So Shraddha has different levels. So when it says Ado Shraddha, in the beginning there's Shraddha. What does that mean? Well, he's going to define that, because there's different levels of Shraddha, of faith. So the first level, he says, Shraddha is the beginning of everything. Faith, Shraddha, respect. Okay. He threw the word respect in there. In other words, if you come to the temple, and there's the welcoming committee, and there's some kids and adults, and they're smiling and say, hello, and they have a badge with their name on it. So, my name is so-and-so, and is this the first time you've come to the temple? Yes. Oh, well, welcome. We're so happy you're here, and we have a gift for you. Right away, we have a gift for you, Then this is for your kid, and this is a book, and this is a cookie, and here's a book for you, a cookbook, and I can show you around the temple, and these are all the different activities, and here's a pamphlet that shows you all the activities in the temple, and we're so happy you came, and where do you live? Oh, you live close by, that's wonderful. And, so they develop a little bit of, first of all, they're happy because they've been greeted like the member of the family, right? And they've got some gifts without asking for them. And they're a little bit surprised to get such a greeting, as if they're a long-lost relative that's come back, right? And the gifts are for their kids also, if they have kids. And now they get an orientation of the activities at the temple, and they're introduced to people. That's another important thing, to introduce them, not only to themselves, the welcoming community, but other people, depending on what they like to do. Like someone might say, oh yeah, well, I'm looking for a temple where, you know, my kids can come and get some spiritual. Oh, well, here's our headmistress here. And she's the headmistress of the school, and she can, you know, we have 2 levels of the school, and this thing and that thing, you know. And then now they're meeting people too, and they're getting introductions to people. So this is personalism, as opposed to just like one time, this American person walked in the temple. I'd never seen him before, so I greeted him. I said, "Hi, what's your name?" He said, "So and so." I said, have you ever been to the temple before? I said, yes. I said, this temple? No. I've been to the temple in New York about, I think he said like 5 or 6 times. I said, oh, really? I said, do you know Ram Bhadra? He said, no. I said, do you know so-and-so? No. Do you know so-and-so? No. Do you know so-and-so? No. I said, you went there 6 times, you don't know any of those devotees? He said, no. He said, you're the first devotee that's ever spoke to me. In other words, he went 5, 6 times to the temple in New York, and nobody asked him his name, nobody spoke to him. He just, you know, sat there, probably had prasadam. Of course, that's good, you know. Now, that's what happens sometimes in some temples. It shouldn't happen in this temple. As soon as a person walks in, a new person walks in, and even the persons that come regularly, they should all be greeted nicely, right? And especially the new people. Okay, so they develop respect by the friendly welcome. Oh, these are nice people. I like these people. I like the atmosphere in the temple. See, the atmosphere of the temple also speaks loudly or preaches to the people. So that means that, you know, when they go to wash, they take their shoes off, they go to wash their hands. If it's wet on the floor and they get their socks wet, that's a no-no. You know, in other words, right from the beginning, they get zapped by something negative. Or they walk into the shoe room and they see it's a complete mess. You know, there's shoes all over the place, and they're almost tripping on them, and they see someone walk in, they just throw their shoes on the ground, they leave it, and they just walk away. And they're devotees, right? Brahmins. This is devastating. Or the shoe room smells bad, or the shoe room is not only has shoes strewn all around, it's dirty, hasn't been swept for a couple weeks, right? That shoe room in that state of a mess is enough to convince a person, I'm never coming here again. Especially if they get their feet wet washing their hands, right? Because we're telling them, take your shoes off. And now they got wet socks. Imagine how devastating that is for a high-class person. Right? You see, we have to be conscious of all these things, right? Oftentimes the people, you know, will come and stand in the, you know, to welcome people, and they completely ignore the shoe room, which is the first place that people are going to go, right? And, you know, and I come by and I said, Prabhu, before you start welcoming people, go into the shoe room and clean the damn thing. Right? And make sure it's not wet where the sink is, you know? And make sure, you know, that you don't have tilak all over the, messed up all over the sink. and clean the sink, damn it. You know, it looks like it hasn't been cleaned for 3 or 4 weeks. Right? Green stuff here, and somebody's spit over there, and the tilak here and there. You know, just get rid of the tilak completely because it makes a mess. You know, keep the place clean, right? So these things are extremely important. Unless we pay attention to them, we're failing. Right away, if the person gets their feet wet, just washing their hands in the sink after they took their shoes off, that's enough to convince them, I'm not coming back here again. One time when we had our old temple, this one lady walked in, and she started looking at the curtains. We had a few curtains, you know, on the windows. And then she told her friend, I'm never coming back here. I've never seen such dirty curtains in my whole life. So obviously in her house, the curtains are extremely clean, right? And she comes to the temple, she sees that the curtains are unclean. She said, I'm never coming back here again. You know, because all that is indicative, or it's an example of what the people are like that are living in the temple. You know? So, I mean, usually we try and keep the altar clean, right? The pujari is trying to keep it clean. But if the kitchen is dirty, the toilet is dirty, the hand wash sink is dirty, that's a statement. I mean, that's why everything in the temple has to be clean. Everything is holy in the temple, isn't it? It's not that, oh, the bathroom is not holy, it's only the altar that's holy. No, the bathroom is also holy, right? It's part of the temple. Everything has got to be clean. Everything has got to be first class. If they come in and everything is first class, from the sink, the floor of the sink, the shoe room, the entrance, and they don't see any dirt anywhere, and everyone has nice clothes, and they're shiny, and they're happy, and they're greeting them, and they're giving them gifts, they say, wow, I'm impressed. You know, I got respect for these people. So that's the beginning of faith, that respect and appreciation. And they say, I was treated really nice here. I didn't expect it. I've gone to other temples. I've never been treated like this before. I'm going to make this my temple. I'm going to come here with my kids. You see, this is preaching. The atmosphere preaches. You don't even have to say a word. People understand there's something good going on here because, look, the place is completely immaculate. Everything is organized, and there's nothing unpleasant. This is better than my own house. See? So every part of the temple, whether it's the rooms, whether it's the library, the bathroom, the shoe room, the kitchen, the prasadam hall, everything has got to be immaculate, clean, and organized. And people who live in a temple and walk past dirt, that means that they have no understanding of Krishna consciousness. And people who are initiated devotees and come to the temple and they see dirt and they walk past it, that means that they haven't understood Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam at all. They have no understanding. They can quote verses, they can say, I got this degree and that degree, but they have no understanding of Krishna consciousness, and they don't understand how to preach. You want to preach, you got to keep everything organized, clean, regulated, etc. That's how you preach. You don't preach by walking past dirt and unclean things in the temple. You should feel, just like one time I was trying to rent, when we tore down the small temple here and we're building this temple, I went to rent a place where we could have our temple. So the owner of this place in Redmond is a very rich guy. You know, in fact, one day he told me he's got $26 million in the bank, and plus all his investments also, right? So he was showing me around for the first time his campus to see which room would be suitable. And we're walking outside from one building to the next, and he stops and picks up a piece of paper that was on the ground. and he crushes it, right? And he walks over to the garbage can and throws it in the garbage can. And this guy, $26 million in the bank, right? But he has such a high sense of, let's say, organization that he did not even want a piece of paper on the ground outside his building. See, that's the type of consciousness we should have for the temple. You know, whether we're walking in and there's some paper outside in the parking lot, or whether we walk inside and it hasn't been swept in the vestibule, in the entrance, or we walk in the showroom, it's a complete mess, or the sink outside the showroom is a complete mess, or the trash can in where the sink is, it hasn't been emptied and it smells bad because people throw dishes in there or their plates in there with food, and it hasn't been the garbage bag hasn't been taken out for about a week, so it starts to stink, right? The food is fermenting. And we just walk past it. We smell it and say, whoa, that smells bad. And just walk past. That means you haven't understood anything about philosophy. There's no philosophy, you know. There's no understanding of Krishna consciousness. It's all selfishness, right? Only thinking about myself, not thinking about Krishna, and this is Krishna's house, and every part of Krishna's house should be immaculately clean. It should be cleaner than our own house. Right? So, this verse, 646, okay, we're going to stop now, and we'll continue tomorrow. Haribol. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Don't walk past dirt in the temple. That's the lesson today. Anywhere where you see something that should not be there or something that's not clean, it should be cleaned immediately. We should feel embarrassed that we're not keeping Krishna's temple clean. And we should take it as a personal, so other people say, that's below me. I don't do things like that, right? I only serve on the altar. That is nonsense. Everything is the altar in the temple. See? Because it all belongs to Krishna. Every aspect of the temple should be clean and organized. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bando Mui Savadana Mate Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Bando Mui Savadana
Janara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatori Ajay Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Krishna prapti hoya hoite.
Krishna prapti hoya.
Shri Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Kya. Arana Koriya Maneya Sa. Shri Guru Charane Bhagwe Ese Uttamagati. Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Uttamagati. E passade pure sarva. Prasade pure sarva sa. Prasade pure sarva sa. Chakshudana dilaje janme janme Prabhu se. Divya Gyani de Prakasito. Divya Gyani de Prakasito. Prema Bhakti Jahoite Admidas Vinasajate. Prema Bhakti Jahoite Admidas Vinasajate. Vedika Janara Charito. Vedika Janara Charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Lokana Lokera Jivana. Lokana Lokera Jivana. Ha Prabhu Kora Doya De Amore Padachaya. 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 Ebeas Dushaki Bhuvana. Ebeas Gusutri Bhuvana. Ebeas Gusutri Bhuvana. Ebeas Gusutri Bhuvana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Bola Jaya Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Jai Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Tarasatara Shri Shimadi's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Anantakoti Vaishnava Vinda ki jai. Namacharya Śrīla Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana ki jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. The lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By His grace, one can cross the ocean of suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus mouth. Attachment to His lotus feet is a perfection fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From Him, ecstatic prema emanates. By Him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and the Lord of master devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread through all the world. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavan Ki Jai.